We've spent 45 episodes wondering what lies beyond the gates. Now we know, and it's far worse than anyone imagined. When Dr. Chen discovers that the Threshold facility isn't researching a cure, but perfecting the next phase of the infection, he faces an impossible choice: return with a treatment that will save the sanctuary but enslave its people, or destroy the only hope of survival they have left. Last time on Beyond the Gates, the sanctuary's foundation was rocked by the revelation that everything they've endured was by design. Commander Reynolds exposed the truth. Their community wasn't random survivors, but subjects in an elaborate social experiment conducted by mysterious architects who engineered the pandemic that collapsed civilization. Dr. Vivian Marsh arrived claiming to be a defector from Threshold, a research facility involved in creating the original infection. She revealed that her blood contained antibodies that could be synthesized into a treatment, but manufacturing it required equipment only available at a Threshold mobile unit 3 days' journey from the sanctuary. Despite suspicions about her true motives, a team was assembled for this critical mission: Dr. Chen to handle the scientific aspects, Maya for security and navigation, and Dr. Marsh as their guide. As they departed through the northern gate, a hidden observation post was revealed on a distant ridge, confirming that the architects were still watching, still collecting data on their experimental subjects. Meanwhile, Marcus, Elena, Sophia, and Liam remained to defend the sanctuary, with Marcus's final warning echoing as the team ventured into the unknown. 3 days there, 3 days back. Any longer, and we'll assume the mission is compromised. As episode 46 begins, our characters find themselves divided not just by distance, but by increasingly divergent realities, each facing challenges that will test their deepest beliefs and most sacred loyalties. Dr. James Chen leads the expedition to the Threshold facility with the measured determination that has defined his character from the beginning. But beneath his scientific pragmatism, a storm of emotions threatens his objectivity. What Dr. Chen fears most is confirmation of his growing suspicion that science, his lifelong devotion, has been weaponized beyond redemption. The possibility that his own research at the sanctuary might have unknowingly contributed to the architect's data collection haunts his quiet moments. What he wants beyond the treatment itself is absolution, some assurance that knowledge can still heal rather than harm. The episode opens with Chen studying a small sample of Marsh's blood by firelight as their expedition makes camp for the night, his face illuminated by the portable microscope as he whispers almost reverently about the elegant design of the antibodies. Admiration and horror intertwined in his analysis. Maya Chen has transformed from the sanctuary's quiet, observant scout to the expedition's vigilant protector. The journey beyond the gates has activated a heightened state of alertness that manifests in her constant scanning of horizons, her fingers never far from her weapon. What Maya fears most is not external threats, but internal betrayal. The possibility that Dr. Marsh is leading them not to salvation, but to further manipulation. What Maya wants is vindication, concrete evidence of who orchestrated humanity's near extinction, and the chance to hold them accountable. Episode 46 begins with Maya on watch as the others sleep, her gaze alternating between their surroundings and Dr. Marsh's sleeping form, the question evident in her expression: guardian or prisoner? Dr. Vivian Marsh remains an enigma 3 days into their journey. Her technical knowledge proves invaluable in navigating the changed landscape, her familiarity with threshold protocols opening routes that would otherwise remain hidden. What Dr. Marsh fears is revealed in fragments. Her nightmares audible to her companions, names and numbers mumbled in troubled sleep, apologies to people who can no longer hear them. What she wants becomes the central mystery driving the expedition forward. Is it truly redemption for her role in creating the infection, or something more complex tied to the architect's ongoing experiment? As episode 46 opens, we find Marsh awake before the others, studying a small device that resembles a compass but with unfamiliar markings, which she quickly conceals when Maya approaches. Back at the sanctuary, Marcus Winters carries the dual burden of leadership and doubt. With half of his most trusted advisors beyond the gates, strategic decisions fall more heavily on his shoulders. What Marcus fears most is making the wrong call, trusting when he should be suspicious, attacking when he should negotiate. The revelation that the sanctuary itself is an experiment has left him questioning every instinct. What Marcus wants is clarity in a situation increasingly defined by shadows and whispers. The episode opens with Marcus in the communications center at dawn, unsuccessfully attempting to reach the expedition team on their scheduled check-in, the silence from their radio amplifying his concern. Elena Vasquez navigates her precarious position within the sanctuary with renewed purpose. Her knowledge of outside communications has become essential in Marcus's efforts to monitor potential threats, gradually restoring her role, if not yet fully her reputation. What Elena fears most is that her redemption will come too late, that the trust she betrayed cannot be rebuilt before the next crisis demands absolute unity. What she wants is to prove that her choice to protect the sanctuary wasn't momentary but fundamental, a complete realignment of loyalty. We find Elena at the beginning of episode 46, analyzing patterns in background radiation that could indicate increased activity around the sanctuary's perimeter. Her discovery of anomalous signals bringing her directly to Marcus despite the early hour. Sophia Reyes has emerged as the sanctuary's emotional center, the civilian perspective that balances Marcus's strategic thinking. The civilian oversight committees she established have evolved into a functioning governance system that keeps the community stable despite the leader's divided attention. What Sophia fears most is panic, that the truth about the architects and the engineered nature of their suffering will destroy the community's morale beyond repair. What she wants is sustainable hope, a vision for the future that acknowledges harsh realities without surrendering to them. The episode opens with Sophia addressing a classroom of sanctuary children, maintaining the routines of education, even as adults whisper about experiments and architects in worried tones beyond the school's walls. Liam Foster has transformed from maintenance chief to security architect, applying his engineering mind to the sanctuary's defense with methodical intensity. His discovery of the mechanism behind the eastern breach has evolved into a comprehensive audit of every system, every structure, every potential vulnerability. What Liam fears most is oversight, missing some subtle sabotage designed to activate at the worst possible moment. What he wants is to reclaim the sanctuary's infrastructure from whoever designed its weaknesses, to make it truly theirs through understanding and modification. Episode 46 begins with Liam in the former Commander Reynolds' quarters, which he has converted to a planning center with detailed schematics covering every wall, his exhaustion evident as he maps potential defensive modifications. Commander Reynolds, still in detention but now under enhanced security following his escape attempt, embodies a chilling patience. Unlike a prisoner counting days to freedom, he observes the sanctuary's operations with the detached interest of a scientist monitoring an experiment. What Reynolds fears, if anything, remains inscrutable behind his composed exterior. What he wants becomes clearer through his occasional cryptic exchanges with guards and visitors. To be present for what he calls the inevitable next phase. As the episode opens, we find Reynolds methodically exercising in his cell, his routine unbroken by circumstance, his eyes occasionally drifting to the security camera with an unsettling hint of anticipation. A new character emerges in episode 46, Dr. Julian Reeves, encountered by the expedition team as they approach the Threshold facility. Claiming to be a research associate who escaped during Threshold's militarization, he presents himself as a potential ally with insider knowledge of the facility's current security protocols. What Dr. Reeves fears is immediately apparent in his cautious approach and nervous energy, recapture by forces he refuses to fully describe. What he wants remains carefully obscured beneath technical information and strategic advice. We first see him through Maya's rifle scope, a distant figure signaling from a concealed position near the expedition's planned route. As day 3 of the expedition dawns and the threshold facility appears on the horizon, a low, utilitarian structure surrounded by perimeter fencing and automated defense systems, our divided characters move toward convergence. The sanctuary team anxiously awaits word from the expedition, while the expedition itself stands at the threshold of discovery, poised to uncover truths that will reshape everything they thought they knew about the world beyond the gates. The episode begins with parallel sequences cutting between the sanctuary and the expedition, establishing the 3-day mark that serves as both deadline and promise. At the sanctuary, Marcus and Elena work in the communications center, attempting to establish contact with the expedition team. Their efforts yield only static, each failed attempt increasing the tension between them. They should have reached the facility by now, Marcus says, the concern in his voice barely contained. Assuming Marsh's directions were accurate, Elena responds, the subtle emphasis on assuming, revealing her lingering suspicion. Their exchange is interrupted by Liam's arrival with troubling news. His analysis of the sanctuary's power grid has revealed a dormant subsystem connected to the water treatment plant. Its purpose unclear, but its design sophisticated. Whatever it's meant to do remains inactive, but its presence confirms that Reynolds wasn't acting alone in modifying sanctuary infrastructure. Meanwhile, the expedition team observes the threshold facility from a concealed position on a nearby ridge. The facility's exterior is deceptively minimal, a series of interlocking prefabricated structures surrounded by a perimeter fence with automated surveillance. Maya studies the security patterns through binoculars, while Chen and Marsh discuss approach strategies. Their planning is interrupted by movement behind them. Dr. Julian Reeves approaching with hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. Maya has her weapon trained on him instantly, but his knowledge of threshold security protocols and apparent familiarity with Marsh, though she claims to only know him by reputation, creates an immediate complication. His warning about facility defenses not visible from their position ultimately convinces them to incorporate his knowledge into their approach plan. The dynamics of the expedition shift with Reeves's arrival, Marsh becoming more guarded, Chen more hopeful about their chances of accessing the treatment technology, and Maya increasingly vigilant, as she now has 2 unknown quantities to monitor rather than 1. The group descends toward the facility, using Reeves' knowledge of blind spots in the security system to approach the eastern perimeter. Back at the sanctuary, Sophia's civilian oversight committee meeting is disrupted by an unexpected discovery. One of the children in the education center has drawn a picture of what appears to be the observation post from the ridge. When questioned, the child explains matter-of-factly that she sees them in her dreams, the people who watch the sanctuary. This revelation triggers Sophia's memory of similar reports from other children, dismissed as nightmares during times of stress. The pattern suggests something more systematic, perhaps a subconscious awareness of surveillance that adults have learned to filter out, but children still perceive. Sophia brings this information to Marcus, who connects it with Elena's detection of anomalous signals. Together, they begin to piece together the possibility that the architect's observation isn't limited to distant posts, but includes some form of surveillance within the sanctuary itself, perhaps utilizing frequencies or technologies designed to operate at the edges of human perception. The narrative returns to the expedition as they breach the threshold facility's outer perimeter. The interior reveals a stark contrast to the utilitarian exterior: advanced technology, pristine laboratories, and automated systems that appear to be functioning despite no visible human presence. Marsh leads them directly to the central laboratory where the treatment can be synthesized, her familiarity with the layout confirming her claimed connection to the facility. As Chen begins working with the synthesis equipment, Reeves offers to help Maya secure their exit route, separating the group in a move that raises tension but makes strategic sense given their limited time. This division creates parallel discoveries that dramatically shift the expedition's understanding of their mission. In the central laboratory, Chen's examination of the facility's research files reveals a disturbing truth. The treatment Marsh described exists, but it's not simply a protective measure against the existing infection. It's a counteragent designed to work in tandem with a secondary pathogen, what the research files call Phase 2. The original infection was never meant to be the end, but rather preparation for a more selective agent that would target those without the treatment. Marsh's reaction to his discovery confirms she knew at least parts of this truth, that the treatment would save the sanctuary residents, but potentially make them dependent on continued doses controlled by threshold. Simultaneously, Maya and Reeves discover the facility's communications center, where Maya insists on sending a status update to the sanctuary, despite Reeves' warnings about signaling their presence. While attempting to establish a secure connection, Maya accesses recent communication logs and discovers transmissions to and from the sanctuary, specifically to the dormant subsystem Liam identified in the water treatment plant. The facility hasn't been abandoned. It's been remotely operated, with the sanctuary as its primary focus. The expedition's fractured discoveries collide when Maya returns to the central laboratory with her findings, just as Chen confronts Marsh about the true nature of the treatment. Reeves's allegiance shifts in this moment of crisis, not aligning with Marsh as might be expected, but revealing a third position in what becomes a three-way standoff. The architects aren't a monolithic force, but factions with different visions for humanity's guided reconstruction. Marsh represents the faction that believes in controlled evolution, using the infection and treatment to shape human development according to predetermined parameters. Reeves reveals himself as part of a splinter group that believes the experiments have gone too far, that observation should replace intervention. And caught between them, the expedition team represents the sanctuary's emerging position, rejection of any external control, regardless of its claimed benevolence. The confrontation in the laboratory escalates when Marsh attempts to complete the treatment synthesis despite Chen's objections. The struggle for control of the process results in damage to the equipment and the partial creation of the treatment, enough for a limited number of doses, but not the sanctuary-wide protection originally promised. In the chaos, Reeves accesses a facility-wide communication system to broadcast a warning to his faction, revealing the existence of a timeline acceleration protocol that would release Phase 2 before the planned deployment schedule. This broadcast triggers automated security protocols within the facility. Lockdown procedures initiate, separating the group as they attempt to escape with the partial treatment. Maya and Chen find themselves cut off from both Marsh and Reeves, forced to navigate the facility's increasingly hostile, automated defenses with only intermittent guidance from Reeves through the internal communication system. Back at the sanctuary, the situation deteriorates when Reynolds manages to communicate with a visiting guard, passing along a message that appears meaningless, a series of numbers that the guard innocently mentions to Liam during a security check. Liam's engineering mind recognizes it as a potential activation sequence and connects it to the dormant subsystem in the water treatment plant. This realization leads to a race against time as Liam, Marcus, and Elena work to isolate and neutralize whatever function the sequence was meant to trigger before Reynolds finds another way to transmit it. The episode's tension peaks with parallel crisis points, the expedition team fighting their way out of the threshold facility with the partial treatment and vital information about Phase 2, while the sanctuary team discovers that the dormant subsystem is designed to introduce the secondary pathogen into the water supply, priming the sanctuary population for dependence on the very treatment the expedition was sent to retrieve. In the threshold facility, Maya and Chen's escape is complicated by Marsh's separate attempt to secure additional treatment components for her faction. Their paths cross in the facility's storage area, where Marsh makes a final appeal for cooperation, arguing that the architect's guided reconstruction is humanity's only hope for sustainable recovery, that without direction, human nature will lead back to the same self-destructive patterns that made the controlled population reduction necessary. Chen's response defines the moral center of the episode. You don't get to break something and then claim only you can fix it, especially when your fix is just a different kind of breaking. The confrontation ends with Marsh neither defeated nor victorious, escaping with some components, but not the complete treatment. Her faction's plans delayed but not derailed. Maya and Chen secure their portion of the treatment and the research data needed to potentially reproduce it, fighting their way to the extraction point where Reeves provides final assistance in disabling the perimeter security before disappearing into the landscape with a cryptic warning. They'll know you were here. They'll know what you took. The sanctuary won't be an experiment anymore. It'll be a threat. At the sanctuary, Liam successfully isolates the dormant subsystem before it can be activated, removing its connection to the water treatment plant and preserving the critical infrastructure. The victory is tempered by the realization that this was likely just one of many hidden mechanisms planted throughout the sanctuary, each designed to activate under specific conditions as the experiment progressed. The episode's final act begins with the expedition team's return journey. Their 3-day window expired, and their findings far more complicated than the simple treatment they sought. Chen works to analyze the partial treatment and research data as they travel, determining that what they have could protect a portion of the sanctuary population, but would require continued synthesis to cover everyone. Synthesis that would be impossible without additional equipment and materials. Maya establishes contact with the sanctuary during a brief rest, her transmission reaching Marcus and Elena in the communications center. The information exchange is necessarily brief but transformative. The sanctuary learns about Phase 2 and the treatment's true purpose, while the expedition learns about the dormant subsystem and Reynolds' attempted activation. Both sides now understand they're caught between competing factions of architects with different visions for humanity's future, and that the sanctuary's rejection of these predetermined paths makes them a target for both groups. As the expedition team makes their final push toward the sanctuary, they spot the first evidence that they're being pursued: drone surveillance in the distance, following their path with mechanical persistence. Maya's training allows her to disable the first drone, but its presence confirms Reeves's warning. The architects now see them as active opposition rather than passive subjects. The episode reaches its emotional climax as the expedition team comes within sight of the sanctuary gates. The pursuit has intensified, with multiple drones and what appears to be a mobile strike team closing in from the east. Their race to safety becomes a test of the sanctuary's new defensive protocols. Will the community that send them out now protect their return, even knowing they bring complications rather than simple solutions? Marcus makes the call without hesitation, mobilizing all available resources to secure the expedition's return. Elena coordinates communications, Sophia organizes civilian support for the incoming team, and Liam implements defensive countermeasures designed specifically to counteract the architect's technology. The sanctuary transforms from experimental subject to active defender, its population unified by the immediate threat despite the unsettling revelations about their community's origins. The expedition's final approach to the gates becomes a gauntlet of coordinated defense and strategic misdirection. Maya's expertise in the field, combined with the sanctuary's home territory advantage, allows them to outmaneuver the pursuit long enough to get the treatment and research data safely inside. The gates close behind them, not as a barrier between safety and danger, but as a statement of sovereignty, a boundary that now carries meaning because they choose to maintain it, not because it was designed for them. The episode ends with the expedition team and sanctuary leadership gathered in Dr. Chen's expanded laboratory, the partial treatment secured, but its implications still unfolding. The immediate question becomes who receives the limited doses available, a decision complicated by the knowledge that the treatment creates dependency that could be exploited if Phase 2 is released. The ethical complexity that has defined the series reaches new heights as they confront these impossible calculations. As they debate, Maya notices something in the research data they retrieved: a geographic distribution map of other experimental communities around the world, each designated with a different governance model and population composition. The sanctuary is just one of dozens, each isolated from the others by design, each generating data for the architect's competing visions of reconstruction. They're not just watching us, Maya realizes. They're watching all of us, comparing results, selecting which model survives. The camera pulls back from this revelation to show a wider view of the sanctuary at night, lights illuminating walls that now represent not just protection, but definition, the boundary between being test subjects and becoming authors of their own future. And beyond those walls, the darkness holds both threat and possibility. Other communities like theirs, similarly manipulated, similarly fighting to understand their place in this engineered apocalypse. Episode 46 of Beyond the Gates masterfully develops several interlinked themes that have been evolving throughout the season, bringing them into sharper focus as the series' mythology expands beyond the sanctuary's boundaries. The most profound theme explored is the tension between determinism and agency, now elevated from philosophical question to literal survival strategy. The revelation that the architects designed not just the infection, but the treatment as another form of control forces our characters to confront whether freedom with vulnerability is preferable to safety with dependency. This dilemma manifests physically in the partial treatment itself, a substance that could save lives while potentially surrendering autonomy, embodying the compromises that define post-collapse existence. The visual symbolism supporting this theme appears throughout the episode. The Threshold facility's sterile, automated environment represents the architect's vision of controlled humanity, functional but without genuine choice. This contrasts sharply with the sanctuary's imperfect but evolving systems, where structures designed by others have been adapted, modified, and claimed through collective effort. Even the drones pursuing the expedition serve as metaphor. Technology without human guidance, programmed to follow predetermined protocols regardless of context or consequence. Another crucial theme is the ethics of knowledge, particularly whether understanding can exist separate from application. Dr. Chen embodies this struggle most directly, his scientific appreciation for the infection's design constantly at war with his horror at its purpose. His confrontation with Marsh in the laboratory crystallizes this conflict. You didn't just create knowledge, he tells her, you created purpose for that knowledge. The infection isn't morally neutral, it was designed specifically to harm. This distinction challenges the common defense that science itself is neither good nor evil, only its application, suggesting instead that intent infuses creation from the beginning. This theme extends visually through the contrast between Chen's portable microscope at the episode's opening, humble technology used to understand and heal, and the Threshold facility's sophisticated equipment designed specifically for controlled distribution of treatment. Both represent human ingenuity, but with fundamentally different relationships to power and autonomy. The episode also deeply explores the concept of factions versus unity, revealed through the competing architect groups represented by Marsh and Reeves. Their disagreement isn't about whether humanity should be guided, but how directly that guidance should manifest. Control through dependency versus control through observation. This mirrors smaller-scale factions within the sanctuary itself, particularly the tension between military and civilian leadership approaches. Sophia's civilian oversight committees and Marcus's strategic defense planning represent different visions of community functioning, gradually finding balance through necessary cooperation rather than dominance. Perhaps most poignantly, Episode 46 examines the human capacity to create meaning from manipulation. The sanctuary was designed as an experiment, its residents selected for specific qualities and responses. Yet the connections formed there, the governance developed, the values prioritized, have transcended their engineered origins. This is visually represented in the children's drawings that Sophia discovers, where the architect's surveillance is perceived but integrated into expression rather than controlling it. The observation post becomes part of the landscape in these drawings, acknowledged but not defining. Two fascinating fan theories have gained traction following this episode's revelations. The first suggests that the competing architect factions represent ideological positions that existed before the collapse. Essentially, that the engineered pandemic was the culmination of pre-existing philosophical conflicts about humanity's future, with each experimental community designed to validate a different vision. This theory is supported by Reeves's references to acceleration versus observation protocols and Marsh's defense of guided reconstruction as necessary for sustainable recovery. If true, this would recontextualize the series apocalypse not as sudden catastrophe, but as the violent resolution of tensions building throughout human history. The second theory proposes that the children of the sanctuary represent an unintended variable in the architect's experiment, a generation born or raised primarily within the experimental parameters, developing perceptions and adaptations the original design didn't account for. Their ability to perceive the surveillance unconsciously, as revealed through Sophia's discovery of the drawings, suggests emerging capabilities that might ultimately surpass both the architect's control and the limitations of pre collapse humanity. This theory finds support in previous episodes' focus on education within the sanctuary and the children's resilience in the face of crises that traumatize adults. If this theory proves accurate, the future of the sanctuary may depend not on the current leadership's decisions, but on the generation being shaped by those decisions. What makes these theories particularly compelling is their grounding in the show's established themes of adaptation and evolution under pressure. Either direction would extend the series' exploration of human resilience while raising the stakes beyond immediate survival to long term transformation. The symbolism of thresholds permeates the episode, from the facility's literal name to the metaphorical boundaries crossed by each character. The treatment itself represents a threshold between vulnerability and dependency, just as the sanctuary's gates now mark a threshold between imposed experiment and chosen community. Maya and Chen cross the threshold into the architect's domain and return changed by the knowledge they've gained. Even time functions as a threshold in this episode, with the 3-day window establishing a clear demarcation between mission and abandonment. At its core, episode 46 asks whether freedom necessitates vulnerability, whether the ability to choose one's path requires accepting the risks that come with that choice. The architect's competing visions both remove this fundamental tension. Marsh's faction by eliminating vulnerability through controlled treatment, Reeves' faction by eliminating genuine choice through manipulated environments. The sanctuary's emerging third position, embodied in Chen's rejection of the complete treatment protocol, suggests that authentic humanity requires maintaining this tension rather than resolving it in either direction. The discovery of other experimental communities around the world expands this philosophical question to global scale. If each community represents a different balance of security and freedom, different approaches to governance and resource allocation, then the architect's experiment becomes a grotesque form of natural selection, determining which vision of humanity survives, not through evolution, but through engineered competition. The sanctuary's rejection of these predetermined options represents not just resistance to control, but insistence on diversity itself as humanity's essential strength. Episode 46 of Beyond the Gates marks a pivotal expansion of the series' scope, transforming what began as one community's struggle for survival into a global contest between competing visions of humanity's future. The journey to the Threshold facility has provided answers that only deepen the fundamental questions. What makes survival worthwhile? Who gets to determine humanity's path forward? Can genuine community emerge from engineered circumstances? The partial treatment secured by the expedition team creates immediate practical and ethical challenges for the sanctuary leadership. With doses sufficient for only a portion of their population, they face an impossible calculation: who receives protection and who remains vulnerable, knowing that this decision could create divisions as dangerous as any external threat. The revelation that the treatment creates dependency compounds this dilemma, forcing them to weigh immediate safety against long-term autonomy in a situation where either choice carries devastating potential consequences. Yet, amid these impossible calculations, the expedition's discoveries have provided something perhaps more valuable than the treatment itself: context and connection. The map of other experimental communities transforms their understanding of their place in the post collapse world. They are not alone in their manipulation or their resistance, not the only group fighting to reclaim agency from those who engineered their suffering. This knowledge offers possibilities beyond mere survival, the potential for alliance and cooperation with others similarly struggling to define themselves beyond their designed parameters. Dr. Chen's analysis of the research data represents the sanctuary's greatest hope and most profound responsibility. Understanding the mechanics of both the infection and the treatment gives them options beyond simple acceptance or rejection of the architect's binary choices. His determination to develop an alternative, protection without dependency, embodies the sanctuary's emerging identity as neither subject nor mirror of their manipulators, but something new emerging from the crucible of engineered apocalypse. Maya's discovery about the competing architect factions provides strategic advantage, even as it complicates their moral landscape. Knowing that their observers are themselves divided creates opportunities for exploitation, for playing these factions against each other while the sanctuary charts its own course. Her training as a scout has evolved into something more complex. Not just mapping physical territory, but navigating ideological battlegrounds, where the sanctuary's autonomy depends on understanding powers far beyond their direct experience. For Marcus, the expedition's return with partial solutions rather than complete answers reinforces his evolution from military strategist to true leader. The decisions before him have no correct answers, no clear path to victory, only competing values and calculated risks. His willingness to shoulder these impossible choices without surrendering to either despair or dictatorship represents the sanctuary's best qualities: pragmatism tempered by principle, determination guided by compassion. Elena's role in coordinating communications during the expedition's return marks another step in her redemption arc, her technical skills now fully realigned with the sanctuary's protection. The trust placed in her during crisis acknowledges that loyalty can be chosen rather than assigned, that betrayal can be a waypoint rather than a destination. Her understanding of the architect's methods, once used to undermine the sanctuary, now becomes essential to identifying and counteracting their continued manipulation. Sophia's discovery about the children's perception of surveillance opens new dimensions for the sanctuary's resistance. If the youngest generation can perceive what adults have been conditioned to ignore, their perspective becomes invaluable in identifying the architect's hidden influences. This elevation of children from protected to protectors challenges traditional power structures in ways that mirror the sanctuary's larger rejection of imposed hierarchies. Liam's successful neutralization of the dormant subsystem represents a physical manifestation of the sanctuary's philosophical position, the reclamation of design structures for self-determined purposes. His engineering mind, once focused on maintaining systems built by others, now works to understand, modify, and ultimately control those systems according to the community's chosen priorities rather than imposed functions. Looking ahead to episode 47, several critical developments appear on the horizon. The sanctuary must implement a distribution plan for the limited treatment, a decision that will test their governance structures and core values more profoundly than any previous crisis. Dr. Chen's efforts to reverse engineer an alternative treatment will race against the architect's potential deployment of Phase 2, with the sanctuary's population caught between competing scientific visions with existential stakes. Most significantly, the map of other experimental communities opens possibilities for contact and alliance beyond the sanctuary's boundaries. If these other groups have reached similar conclusions about their manipulation, cooperation could exponentially increase their collective chances against the architect's controlled competition. However, communities designed with different governance models may find collaboration difficult, even with shared opposition to their creators. The pursuit that followed the expedition team suggests the architects, or at least Marcia's faction, now view the sanctuary as active opposition rather than passive subjects. This escalation likely heralds more direct confrontation in coming episodes, testing the sanctuary's defenses against adversaries with vastly superior technology and resources, but potentially less unity and adaptability. Beyond the Gates continues to excel at balancing intimate human drama against its expanding mythology. Episode 46 reminds us that even in a world designed by others, the meaning we create through connection and choice remains authentically our own. The architects may have selected the sanctuary residents for their specific qualities, may have engineered crises to test their responses, but could not predict or control the community that emerged from these manipulations. A community now positioned to challenge its creators' fundamental assumptions. The partial treatment serves as perfect metaphor for the sanctuary situation, incomplete, imperfect, but offering possibilities beyond the binary options presented by their manipulators. Like the treatment, their resistance remains experimental, its ultimate effectiveness uncertain, but representing genuine choice in a world designed to eliminate meaningful alternatives. As our characters grapple with distribution decisions and defense preparations, they confront questions that transcend their specific circumstances. Is security without autonomy a form of protection or another kind of harm? Can communities with fundamentally different values cooperate against common threats without compromising their core identities? Does understanding the systems that control us provide liberation or simply more sophisticated forms of compliance? Episode 46 leaves the sanctuary at a crossroads where the paths forward are neither clear nor clean. The knowledge gained beyond the gates has expanded their understanding but narrowed their options, revealing both greater threats and greater possibilities than they previously imagined. The architects' competing visions for humanity's reconstruction now face an unplanned alternative. Communities that refuse pre designed paths and insist on writing their own stories, even in a world where the pages and pens were provided by others. The discovery that children can perceive the surveillance unconsciously suggests the ultimate hope for the sanctuary's future. That the next generation might develop beyond not just the architect's control, but beyond the limitations their parents carried from the pre collapse world. In this sense, the true experiment may not be the one designed by the architects, but the one emerging organically within the sanctuary itself. Can humanity evolve beyond the patterns that led to collapse, not through external guidance, but through internal transformation? If you found this breakdown of episode 46 illuminating, there's much more to uncover in the world beyond the gates. Will the sanctuary develop an alternative to the architect's treatment? How will they establish contact with other experimental communities? And which faction of architects will strike first against this unexpected resistance? Like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into this revolutionary drama series. Share your own theories about the competing architect factions and which experimental community might become the sanctuary's first ally in the comments below. And join us next week as we explore the impossible choices facing our characters as they distribute the limited treatment while preparing for the architect's inevitable response to their defiance.